Greetings, Culture Warriors. This is Jeff Vieira, author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this Dispatch from the Front. Cautionary tale for you today. This is from the Associated Press. John Raby. From Powerball winner to scandal, Jack Whittaker dies at 72. Andrew Jack Whittaker Jr., whose life became rife with setbacks and tragedy after winning a record $315 million Powerball jackpot on Christmas night in 2002, has died. He was 72. The Ronald Meadows Funeral Parlor in Hinton confirmed it. A funeral home official who declined to give his name said Tuesday that Whittaker died of natural causes, but he refused to say when or where, and he said a service would be private. Whittaker became an instant celebrity at 55 when he claimed that what was then the largest U.S. lottery jackpot won by a single ticket. He opted for the lump sum payout of $113.4 million after taxes and flew off to New York with his family in a private jet to appear on network morning TV shows. But he quickly fell victim to scandals, lawsuits, and personal setbacks as he endured constant requests for money, leaving him unable to trust others. Several times he was quoted as saying he wished he had torn up the ticket. His wife left him. A friend of his drug-addicted granddaughter was found dead at his home in 2004. 3 months later, his 17-year-old granddaughter was gone too. His daughter, Ginger Whittaker Bragg, died in 2009 at age 42 after struggling for years with cancer. And in 2016, he lost his Virginia home to a fire. He struggled with drinking and gambling. His home and car were repeatedly burglarized. At a strip club, thieves broke into his Lincoln Navigator and stole a briefcase stuffed with $245,000 and three $100,000 cashier's checks. That time, at least, he caught a break. The briefcase was later found with the money still inside. Whittaker was charged twice with driving under the influence and sued repeatedly, once by 3 female casino employees who accused him of assault. In a 2007 interview with the Associated Press, Whittaker knew his legacy was already written. "I'm only going to be remembered as the lunatic who won the lottery," Whittaker said. "I'm not proud of that. I want to be remembered as someone who helped a lot of people." At that point, Whittaker said he still had plenty of money. How much remained at his death and who might benefit from his estate was not immediately clear on Tuesday. Known for wearing cowboy hats and Western-style clothing, Whittaker was a self-made millionaire long before he won the lottery, having built construction businesses worth $17 million. A regular Powerball player, Whittaker, who then lived in Scott Depot, already had concrete plans to share his prize with churches and his family when he claimed his winnings. "I've had to work for everything in my life. This is the first thing that's ever been given to me," Whittaker said then. A foundation started in Whittaker's name spent $23 million building 2 churches in the years after his jackpot win, and his family donated food, clothing, and college scholarships to local students. Whittaker also put his granddaughter, Brandy Bragg, on his payroll. But his plans to give his inheritance to her were vanquished when, just before Christmas in 2004, her body was found in a junked van, hidden by a boyfriend who panicked when he found her dead. An autopsy didn't pinpoint a cause. She was going to inherit everything, Whittaker said. Okay, so a lot to talk about here. He won $315 million. I want you to note on there that the lump sum payout was $113.4 million. So how much of his $315 million did the government take? And so to figure that out, you've got to take the 315 minus the 113.4 he got. That's 201.6 million. Divide that by the original of 315. And you'll find that the government took 64% of his winnings in taxes. 64%. That's almost 2/3. Does anyone think, when they're playing those lottery tickets, does anyone think that the government's going to take 2/3 of the winnings? I don't think that's well known. They do publicize a lot of these lotteries, ostensibly, they claim are for the schools. That's how the government kind of justifies the moral hazard of gambling in the case of these lotteries. But they're taking 2/3 of those winnings. So you can look at that and say, well, that was a good thing. At least the schools got their money, etc. But don't forget, Whittaker wasn't the only one who played that lottery. Where did the money go for the losing tickets? Well, the lotteries wouldn't be in place if they weren't profitable. So you can bet that they had to at least cover the amount of the winnings plus whatever it takes to administer the lottery, all the people that work for the lottery commission and all the stuff they need in order to make it happen. So you can bet that there was a lot more money floating around that was taken from the hands of people who were not millionaires, because Whittaker was the exception. Generally, millionaires don't play the lottery. It's typically poor people. And in fact, what lotteries are in this day and age, state-run lotteries, they are nothing more than a tax on the poor. It's an income transfer from poor people to the teachers' unions. Because who gets most of that money that flows through the schools? It's the teachers' unions. And the teachers' unions are the largest supporter of what political party in the U.S.? Ding, 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 the Democrats. So when you see these lotteries and you see how much money flows through them, you see what is taken, bear in mind that this is nothing more than a scheme to enrich Democrats. That's all it is. Whittaker was a successful man by any standard. He built a business. $17 million in value. That's a pretty good deal. Personally, he was a millionaire himself. So some amount of that $17 million in value, he accrued himself along the way in building that business. He was active in his church. He spent $23 million building churches from his winnings. So a successful man. And yet, the sudden influx of this $113.4 million brought a lot of misery upon him. And it wasn't just the money which brought that misery down on his head, but rather the publicity. Going off to appear on those network TV morning shows was really what did Mr. Whittaker in. Because he was now under a media microscope. Now everyone knew who that lottery winner was. Everyone knew that he was inclined to give money away. So he became a great big target for a lot of unscrupulous, grasping people. Sadly, both in his family and circle of friends, as well as perfect strangers. It's a story that's been written time and again about winners of lotteries. Some of the other things, people dying of cancer and all that is just nonsense from the media. That happens in every family. That's life. You talk about his granddaughter who was drug addicted. Well, lots of people have drug addicted granddaughters. It had absolutely nothing to do with the lottery in this case. But what I want to talk about in regard to this story and cultural values is very simple. It's the notion that money equals happiness, and that more money equals more happiness. That is clearly not the case when we take a look at Whittaker and his fellow lottery winners. The money and the fame that came with how they got the money generally brings misery. because the lottery winnings were not earned in any sense of the word. Someone bought a ticket, they won the lottery. That's not the same as what he did with his construction business, laboring long hours down through the years, carefully nursing it through upturns and downturns until you've built something of real value and real wealth. That's earned. And I suspect that Mr. Whittaker viewed the money that he had made along the way differently than he viewed those lottery winnings. I doubt very much that he drove around to strip clubs with $245,000 in briefcases before he won that lottery. And I doubt that the money in that briefcase came from the nest egg he had built up building up that construction business. Very much doubt it. Psychologically, they're very different things. And unfortunately, people who would feel guilty stealing from the cash register of a small business owner would feel no such compunction of taking a big stack of cash from a pile someone won in the lottery. Because it was not earned, they feel like they have some entitlement to it. And there's a psychological aspect to that, I'm sure. But Whittaker, on the day that those lottery numbers came up, I'm sure he was absolutely tickled, absolutely thrilled. And you can see from his interviews and those of other lottery winners when they first win, you'll hear that they intend to use that money for good things. Why? Because it's a windfall. They weren't expecting it. So you feel almost obligated to earmark a large portion of it for, quote, good causes, right? Whatever those causes may be. Planting churches is one such good cause, but you have to be careful. There's an aspect of this where you feel like you were blessed with that lottery win by God, and so therefore you ought to do something with it that is in keeping with what God would want. The trick is understanding what God would want. I don't know what church Mr. Whittaker belonged to, but it's sufficient to say that not every church is pleasing in the eyes of God, and not every church planting project is a good thing. People make off with the money. You get shaken down by unscrupulous pastors who don't really believe in what the church teaches, and they just take the money and build something for themselves. It's got nothing to do with God. And let's face it, God can't be bought in any case. You read all through Scripture and you find that there is a preference for the poor. It is not the poor man who was told that he was unlikely to get into heaven, but the rich man. Specifically because when you're a rich person, you have a greater affinity, a greater tie, a stronger bond to material things than someone who isn't. And that tie to this world through those material things takes you further and further from God and from sanctity. And if you can't live that holy life, you're not going to make it in the end. Mr. Whittaker, from the article anyway, wasn't living much of a holy life at the end. It was sad. His wife had left him. Doesn't say why, but it probably was something related to money and how he was using it. But it's a sad life throwing around money in casinos and strip clubs rather than being surrounded with your family. And given the tragedies that he, like so many others, have endured in their families, you can only suspect that towards the end of his life, Mr. Whittaker was probably lonely. He certainly seemed bitter about the whole thing, and why not? This was something that should have been good fortune and just triggered enormous misery. But the lesson in all this for all of us, I think, is to not equate money with happiness. In our own lives, when you think back to when you were happiest in your life, the happiest days of your life, and you reflect back on what you owned at that point in your life, I think very few of us say that the happiest days of their lives were also when they were the richest, when they made the most. For most of us, the happiness derived from other things, and in fact may have in part resulted from the fact that we didn't have everything materially that we could want. And when you reflect back on that happiness and you think about what made you so happy, it probably wasn't you being alone in a strip club with a big briefcase full of cash out in the car that features in those memories. It was family, it was friends. Things which cannot be bought. So the sad case of Mr. Whittaker here, a private funeral, that undoubtedly was his wish, given how much the spotlight had burned him down the years. You look at it, 18 years since he won that lottery, and those 18 years characterized almost unrelenting misery for the poor man. The reporter, of course, wants to know who gets the money, because they have completely missed the point. It would be better, probably for all concerned, if the money were simply taken out back and burned, whatever's left of it. That probably won't happen. But whatever money is spent, and hopefully it's diffused widely so that the impact of the negative impacts of it are likewise diffused. But if one person were to inherit whatever's left from Mr. Whittaker, he would inherit 100% of the curse that windfall represented to Mr. Whittaker. And the story goes on and on and on. Money won't buy you happiness. You need some amount of it to remove enough pain and struggle from your life so that you can at least have some respite in this world. But we should all value happiness probably more than we do, and money a lot less than we do. Because at the end of the day, being rich is one thing, but happiness, true happiness, well, that's just about everything. Have a great day.